Good. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I do hope you're well, enjoying the sunshine. Feels like a bit of summer is here or almost here. So good to have the sunshine. Now, we're currently in a preaching series entitled Unrivalled. And just to give you, in case you haven't been to Hope Church before, you've missed a couple of the last few Sundays, just a very quick kind of what is the reason for this series and what's the heart behind it and why are we taking time to look through the attributes of God. That the key point is, in our changing, challenging times that we are living in, as Christians and the church, we need fresh revelation and understanding of who God is. We really do need to recapture the big picture of all that God is. And as I keep saying, I've said it every single week, we began this series, that if your knowledge of God doesn't grow, then you won't grow as a Christian. We are transformed by a revelation of who God is. So over this 8 weeks, we are looking at different attributes and characteristics of God. The picture that I've been giving you each time is that each week we're taking a big log and we're putting it in the fire. We're putting it in the fire of our hearts. We want it to burn brighter and stronger and longer in our love for God. So each week is a kind of a log that goes on the fire. So we began week 1 by looking at the truth that God is infinite. We are limited, but God is limitless. Second week, we looked at the truth that God is creator, that God is dependent on nothing or no one else. God can create a way where there is no way. And last week, we looked at the truth, the wonderful truth, that God is unchanging. He never changes. He is the rock of our salvation. Everything in this world changes. We are standing on a planet that is constantly revolving and changing. But God never changes. Okay, just before we get into what we're going to look at this week, each one of us, wherever we are born, is linked to a particular generation. Our age and the date of birth, when we are born, we are linked to a particular generation. So I just want to have a bit of fun for a moment. If you were born in the UK, now I do know that many people, part of Hope Church, are born in different parts of the world. But if you were born in the UK, then I'm going to put an image up on here that if you were a child of this particular era, you would know what I was talking about. If you're a child of the 80s, you would know what one of these is. Okay, this is a Walkman, a Sony Walkman, which was the coolest thing to have in the 80s. And cassette tapes, you know, some of you need translation if you're young people. What's a cassette tape? What's a Walkman? But cassette tapes went into the Walkman. You put it over and you go out for a run or you go out for a walk. If you're a child of the 80s, you would know what one of these Walkmans were. Let me give you a few other things from the 80s. If you were born in the 80s and grew up in the UK in the 80s, you would know what a spirograph was. Okay, don't go on to the next one yet. Come back to that one. You would know that in the 80s, TV shut down at midnight. I mean, it did. Young people are going to go, what? What did you do at midnight? The TV shut down. There was nothing, just a really bizarre image of a girl sitting looking at a toy or something. Anyway, TV stopped at midnight. I remember one other thing from the 80s, electric pencil sharpeners. So like these huge box that would go on your desk and hours of fun in the office. People in the 80s called these keyboards that Dionisi was playing so wonderfully synthesizers. You know, synthesizers were everywhere. People wore fluorescent and neon clothing. Shell suits as well. People wore those a little bit from last week of my fashion sense and saving up for a green Nike tracksuit. If you watch Saturday afternoon TV, You would have watched Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy. I mean, if some of you going, what is he talking about? What is he? You weren't a child of the 80s. So if you were born at a particular time and grew up in the 80s, a Walkman and some of these things will immediately trigger something in you. Let's go a little bit more up to date. The next picture. I wonder if anyone actually knows what this is. This brought back a kind of a creepy and cute kind of creepy. I'm not quite sure. These are Furbies. Okay, these are Furbies. They were a massive toy in the 90s. If you're a child of the 90s, then these Furbies would have been something that you might have known a lot about. I can't quite work out whether they're cute or creepy, but I'll leave that up to you. They make these weird noises as well. Kind of sometimes in the middle of the night, they make these weird noises. And if you were a child of the 90s, growing up in the 90s, here's a few things that may have been part of your era. Maybe you had a padlock diary. Okay, they were massive. They were in a padlock diary. If you were a child of the 90s, you certainly went to Blockbuster Video. Blockbuster Video, wow, what a difference. That used to be the strap line. And you used to go, again, young people, you're going to go, what? You didn't just like click on and go to Sky or go to Sky Store or go online. No, you had to physically go to a shop, choose your cassette video VHS to take home and watch for the evening and then post it back the next day. You went to Blockbuster Video. Okay, you probably, if you're a child of the 90s, drunk Sunny Delight. And then what impact is going to have on my skin, you know? How many colorings are in this stuff? If you're a child of the 90s, you went to Woolworths and pick and mix Woolworths. And again, young people, you're not going to, if you were in the 90s, you would have had a mobile phone, but there was only one game you could play on your Nokia, and that was Snake. Okay, you spend all evening, all day playing Snake. It was the only game. Literally, it was like that. It was a snake on a screen. That was it. And last one, if you're a child of the 90s, you would have heard a sound. You would have heard a sound that goes like this. The sound of a modem. The sound of kind of your internet connecting via a modem. And you can't be on the phone and on the internet. Just not happening. Get off the phone. I want to go on the internet. I'm on the internet. No, I want to go on the phone. You know, that was the 90s. That was the 90s. I'll stop there, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is this. We are all connected to a particular area or era of history that we were born into. And all of us will inhabit a 70 or 80 years. That is our lifespan. And we are shaped by the events that take place in that 70 or 80 years. We are creatures of a different era. And we have, because of that, a limited perspective. And we have, as human beings, limited years. And in that aspect, we could not be more different from God than we would think. We are so different from God. Let's look at Revelation 1 and verse 8, because we could not be more different than God. Revelation 1 and verse 8 says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is, and who was, and who is to come, the Almighty. Here we have in the opening lines of Revelation, a declaration that God is unlimited by time. God determines time's beginning and end. So what I want to look at today is the truth that God is eternal. He is unlimited by time. Now in the Bible begins, Genesis 1 and verse 1, by saying, in the beginning. There's a time stamp when this world was created. We then have 66 books of the Bible and different seasons and times. But we find in all the stories that we read in Scripture that God is not bound by time. God is free to act in time as he wills, and he exists outside of time. God is past, God is present, and God is future. And in the past, there are no missed opportunities when it comes to God. In the present, there is no anxiety when it comes to God. And in the future, there is no uncertainty when it comes to God. God is never early or late. God is never subject to a deadline. God is never in a hurry or playing catch up. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 1. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. But if we're honest, if we are brutally honest, it doesn't always feel that way from our human perspective. At times, it feels like God is temporarily checked out. You see, we all acknowledge that there is appropriate time for everything. It's just that we have a very clear opinion about when that time should be. A time to heal is immediately when someone is sick. A time to be silent is after I've given my opinion. A time to die is after someone has had a full life of 80, 90 years. All around us, we see tragedy and joy mixed up. We see birth and death. We see endings and beginnings. We see mourning and dancing. We see it all mixed up, mixed together in this world that we live in. And as human beings, we can't understand it. As human beings, we struggle. Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 11 says this: He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. You see, we look around at the times and the seasons, and we can often ask, where is the beauty that God is bringing from this disaster? Where is the beauty that God is bringing from this pain? And we expect it to be in our time. But the one who determines the beginning and the end is not operating from our timelines. He will work all things for his purposes, but not always to our timeline. Let me give you an example. You see, every sorrow and hurt that we suffer will, Scripture tells us, be redeemed for good. But sometimes that takes more than one lifetime for the ugly to be made beautiful. Sometimes we will go to our graves without the wicked having seen and had their due. We may die without the resolution to our own plotline. Our final breath may be, Lord, I don't understand. You see, so often we cannot find out what God is doing within the boundaries of our birth and death. It's not a problem of God's timing. It's a problem of our perception of God's timing. Let me give you an illustration which I hope will really help you. I read it this week and it really helped me. It's an illustration that hopefully brings to the fore the whole challenging issue of looking at God's timing and our perception of God's timing. So here we go. So just imagine for a minute a nursery class of children. 4 or 5-year-olds. They go to nursery before they go to reception, before they go to school. And just imagine that nursery teacher trying to explain the concept of time to 5-year-olds. At the start of the week, the class are all there with their little desks and their pieces of paper, and the teacher says, take out your paper and pencil. Today is Monday. She writes it on the board. Today, Monday. Yesterday was Sunday. Tomorrow is Tuesday. All around the classroom, everyone nods their heads. Yeah, they write it down. They copy it off the board. Yes, today is Monday. Yesterday was Sunday. Tomorrow is Tuesday. But then it gets difficult the next day, on Tuesday, when the teacher repeats the process. She gets the children to get their piece of paper out, to get their pencils out, and says, write on your piece of paper, today is Tuesday. A look of concern flashes up on a student's face. Then write down, the teacher says, that yesterday was Monday. A hand shot up. Miss, you said today was Monday. No, Monday was yesterday. Today is Tuesday. More worried looks on the 5-year-old faces. Miss, you told us tomorrow is Tuesday. No, today is Tuesday and tomorrow is Wednesday. There's uproar in the classroom. The kids are getting upset because from their perception, the teacher had given them false information. The teacher had offered a contradiction that didn't make sense. First, she had said that today was Monday, and then she'd said that today was Tuesday. Which one was it, they wanted to know? Could they trust their teacher? Now, of course, we know that both statements are perfectly true. But the 5-year-olds had not yet grasped the concept of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. You see, the key problem is not with the message. The problem was with the limited ability of the 5-year-olds to understand. And that illustration really helped me because I think that's like us. We're so often like that when it comes to God and his timings. We hear that promise, God makes everything beautiful in its time, from Ecclesiastes. But we see the unresolved sorrows and the hurts in our lives and the lives of others. And then we worry that the Bible can't be trusted, and we forget that God's perceptions are infinitely greater than our own. I mean, think of it like this. If you've got a kind of a scale of spiritual insight, and you've got 0 over here, and you've got God over here, it's even a little bit prideful to suggest that we're like the 5-year-olds trying to understand the ways and the timings of God. I think we must neither be surprised nor discouraged to find that we are at a loss to understand the timing of one who transcends yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Isaiah 55, verse 8-9 says this: "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." You see, we cannot, as limited human beings, be expected to understand all of our human history this side of glory. But we can. We can trust the one who was and is to come. We can trust the one who is Lord of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We can trust God who is eternal. Now, let's earth this a little bit. How does this relate to us? How do we live this out? What difference does this make to our lives? Well, I think that we need to learn to be able to live in the present. It sounds simple, but we all know it's very difficult. Ephesians 5 and verse 16-17 says this: "Be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil." Or in the King James's version, verse 16 says that we are to redeem the time. What does that mean? It means we are to reclaim our time, not from useless pursuits, but we are to reclaim our time for the glory of God. So what I want to look at to close is this. How do we do this? How do we redeem the time? What does that look like to live in the present? God is eternal. We don't understand everything that is going on, but we can live in the now. How do we do that? Because if you're anything like me, it's hard and it's challenging. 3 things to help us to live in the now. Firstly, we need to live in the present by letting go of the past. One of the things that stops us from living in the present is the cling or the claws of the past that are digging into us. And I think there's 2 different emotions that are there when it comes to letting go of the past. There's a sinful nostalgia. You see, I think sometimes our mind goes round and round like this. We idolize a time when life was better, or life was simpler, or life was more joyful. Our health was better. The kids were younger. There was no bad news on the horizon. Loved ones were still with us. We long for these times. Now listen, seasons change, and it's okay to grieve a happy season in our life. But there's a difference between missing the past and idolizing and building up the past. And the key to dealing with this is gratitude. Gratitude is the key. Gratitude of what God has done. Gratitude about what you have. Gratitude that God is with you. Gratitude about the truths of Scripture. Gratitude, thanking God for all that He has done in our life. So sometimes we can't live in the present because there is a sinful nostalgia. But the other thing that stops us sometimes from living in the present, and we need to let go of the past, is regret. We dwell on past mistakes. We dwell on past hurts. And that robs us of a joy in the present. It drags back sometimes to sinful habits and sinful patterns. What do we do when we're living in regret? What do we do when everything is pulling us back to times when we messed up and things that we wish were different? What do? We lift our head to the one who breaks the power of sin. That's what we do. We lift our heads and look to Jesus who cuts off the power of sin. We have an assurance that God is at work in us. There is a sanctification slowly at work in us. Are we the finished article? No, but God is at work in us. His power has broken the chains of sin. We do not need to live under the shadow of our past, but live through our past into what God has for us. We combat that bad news. We combat those regrets with the good news of the gospel. So how do we live in the present? We first need to let go of the past. We then need to let go of the future. And what you'll find is different ones of you, you'll have a propensity to be a person who lives in the past, or you'll have a propensity to be someone who lives in the future. There's often a particular way that we are wired. So to live in the present, we then need to let go of the future. We don't want to cling to what is to come, but to live in the now. And again, that can be a sinful anticipation about what is to come, constantly anticipating the next stage of life. If you're a teenager, constantly anticipating university or working. If you're a young mom, constantly anticipating when your child can go to school or when they leave home. Or if you're a person, a man or a woman in their 50s or 60s, constantly anticipating the day that you retire. An anticipation about the future is good. It's good. We're to look forward to things, but not as an escape from the present. Again, the key to deal with this is gratitude. A gratitude for what you have in the present. A gratitude for the job you have. A gratitude for the child you have. A gratitude for the family you have. A gratitude that you have a house to live in and food on your table. A gratitude for what you have. So some of you, it's that anxiety about the future, that sinful anticipation that is just robbing you of joy in the present. And then there's anxiety about the future, living in dread about what might be around the corner. Fear and uncertainty about losing your job, or fear and uncertainty about someone dear to you passing away, or fear and uncertainty that that same thing's going to happen that happened back then. It's going to happen in the future. It's going to happen again. But Jesus told us not to be anxious about the future in Matthew chapter 6 in the Sermon on the Mount. We're told to remember that God is with us, that God walks through us with life, that we do not need to be anxious. Let each tomorrow worry about the troubles that it has, and today live in the grace and the freedom of God. So to live in the present, we need to deal with the past, let go of the past, and we need to let go of the future. And then finally, we need to live today fully. We need to be fully present in our day, in our moment. And I think there's two kind of challenges that many of us have in doing that. And they're extremes, and I'll outline them. But again, we probably will veer to one side or the other. Because I think we struggle to live today fully because either we're on the lazy side or we're on the overtly busy side. So those of us, and I'll give you the extreme lazy side is, there's always more time. I'll just procrastinate. I'll miss deadlines. I won't apply for the job. I won't do X, Y, or Z. It doesn't matter. It can wait. But God has given us time, and time is precious. We need to live fully now in the moment. But some of us, it's not that we're lazy. It's not that we ever procrastinate. It's not that we actually ever let ourselves have a moment to rest, because we're over here on the busy scale. We're over here and there's never enough time. And we're exhausted because we're overcommitted in 10 million different things, because we don't want to miss a moment that this life has given to us. We want to squeeze every last second out of the day because, of course, we want to redeem the time. If that's us, we need to be able to learn to Sabbath, to be able to learn to be still, to be able to learn to trust God, to give time to rest, time for a day off, time to let things go. To live in the present is a challenge. To live in the present is not easy. We will all be battling with different elements of letting go of the past, of letting go of the future, of fully living in the moment. I mean, you could have a whole seminar, a whole preach on what I've just tried to cover in those 5 minutes. It's difficult. But when God is eternal, we are called to live in the present. That's what we can do. Understanding all of how things weave together and all the intricacies of God's timing is beyond us. But we can live in the present. The second thing that we can do is we can live knowing each day is a gift. In the middle of the Bible, there's Psalm 90. I would encourage you to go home and read Psalm 90. It's a beautiful psalm. It touches on a lot of the things that I've mentioned today. But just the first 4 verses of Psalm 90, verses 1 to 4. It comes up, Psalm 90, 1 to 4. Otherwise, I read it from the Bible. Don't worry. Lord, you have been... It's fine. There you go. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. It's a psalm that talks about the timelessness of God and the brevity of man's life. And in verse 12 of Psalm 90, it says this. It says, teach us, Lord, to number our days. There is a wisdom, church. There is a wisdom in numbering and counting our days. Now, normally this happens when someone has a health scare. You hear these stories of someone having a cancer scare, or you hear these stories of people having a near-death experience. And then as a result of that, they say, I had a renewed understanding of my kind of numbered days. And I want to make the most of every day I have. I want to live well. Tomorrow is only if the Lord wills. You see, I think this is such a helpful perspective to have. That every day, that every year is a gift. That it is a gracious gift that God has given to us. That it is not deserved. God does not owe us 70 or 80 years. And I think we live differently when we regard the future as a gift, when we regard the future as a place that we go if God wills. That we thank the Lord for the time, for the years that he has allotted us. That we acknowledge that they are perfect in number. I mean, that's a challenging thing to grapple with. But I think if we can come to a peace and a place where the Lord helps us understand that the preciousness of every day we have, the preciousness of every year we live, that every birthday is a celebration of God's gift to us of another year. That we thank the Lord for all that he has given us. And we say, if the Lord wills, for tomorrow, for today, I will live to the max. Third thing and final thing for us, to live in the present. We are to live investing in what has eternal significance. Live in investing in what has eternal significance. Psalm 90, again, twice it there asks, the psalmist asks, that in the 70 or 80 years that the Lord might give them, the psalmist asks that the impact of their life might outlive the years that they live. That's what the psalmist says twice in Psalm 90. Jesus says it like this. He says, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. What are treasures in heaven? Treasures in heaven are investing our lives in things of eternal significance. This side of heaven, what is it that is of eternal significance? Well, this side of heaven, what is of eternal significance is other people. It's the person to your left, the person to your right, the person in front of you, the person behind you. It's people. If you want to live today well, you invest in other human beings. You invest in people. You prioritize human relationships over material gain. You see, we cannot take stuff with us. We cannot take our houses, our homes, our clothes, our bikes, our cars, our computers, our laptops, our PlayStations. We cannot take them with us to heaven. But you know what? When we feed the hungry, when we clothe the needy, when we speak an encouraging word to someone, when we comfort those who mourn, when we share the good news of Jesus Christ, when we do these things, we are storing up for ourselves treasures in heaven. we are then impacting this world with eternal significance. So let me tell you, that is the calling upon each of us. Whether you are a missionary, a mother, a teacher, a business leader, a student, whatever you may be doing for your vocation or whatever stage of life you may be in, the calling upon you is to impact other people with the eternal handprint of God. That's what we're called to do. That's where our priority should lie. And if we want to live today well, that is what we give ourselves to. I love being here on a Tuesday when Hope Church opens the hub, because the whole day is about people. It begins with mums and toddlers coming in. It begins with people coming off the street and meeting people and having a cup of coffee and a smile and a chat and talking through how difficult it is being a mum, and people just sharing and talking and praying sometimes, but just bringing the life and the love of Christ by blessing other people. Then in the afternoon, Hope at the Hub, all kinds of different people coming in, having a cup of tea, all welcomed, all equal, all able to talk round a table, to play a game, to have a quiz, because we value people. We value those who are from every tribe and tongue and background. Then from 4 to 6, Tom and Phoebe running the drop-in for young people after school to come along, to have a place where they feel accepted, a place where they can play a game, where they can chat, where they can just talk about the ups and downs of life. And then Alpha, we run in the evening of this season when people come and have a meal, are blessed with a beautifully cooked meal, and talk through the questions of life. The big questions of where is God in suffering, and what happened when Jesus died, and did he rise again, and how do you pray, and can you trust the Bible? It's a day about people. It's a day that invests in eternity. And it's a beautiful day. And every day, each one of us can choose to say, I will invest in what is of eternal significance. I will invest in people. So to sum up, how do we live and make the most of today? We learn to live in the present. We learn to let go of the past. We learn to let go of the future. We learn to fully engage in today. We learn to live because every day is a gift from our Father in heaven. We don't know how many days we may have ahead lined up for us, but we take today as a gift that we want to celebrate and enjoy. And Lord, if the Lord wills, we will take tomorrow. And if the Lord wills the next day, we will take the next day. But every day is a gift that we celebrate and we enjoy. And we invest in what is of eternal significance, human beings, one another. You see, long after this generation fades away like grass, I always forget, whether we are Generation X or whatever generation we are. I know there's different names for them, but, whatever generation you are in, that generation will fade away. But the God of the generations will endure. He is the God of everlasting. He is the God of 1,000 years are like a moment, are like a day. He is the God who is not bound by time. He is the God who is eternal. He is the God who is eternal. My little head is exploding, trying to think through and reason through and understand that very statement that God is eternal. But you know what? I will worship him who is eternal. I will worship one who is not like me, and thankfully he is not like me.